Hello, and welcome to Wine Grants, unscripted chat about the unfunded, the official podcast of the Unfunded List. I'm Dave Moss, founder of the Unfunded List and temporary indefinite executive director, acting, of the Moss Family Foundation. We are returning from a long hiatus and very pleased to have with me in the booth this time a person no stranger to being in a small room with me, Dipanwita Das. Say hello, Dipanwita. Welcome to the booth.
Hello.
It is great to have you here. And since you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know that every week we read our guest's bio out loud, although it has been several weeks since we've had an episode. But this week will be no different from the past, and I will begin now. Dipanwita Das is a digital strategist, communications trainer, and technology entrepreneur. The founder and CEO of Das Social Strategies, she helps nonprofits, social enterprises, and foundations to innovate and harness digital tools for social change. Her work has launched social movement campaigns, and supported philanthropic projects around the globe. She has trained and built tech solutions for clients like Vice President Gore's Climate Reality Project, Oceana, the United Nations Foundation, the Global Health Advocacy Incubator, and the Sehgal Foundation of India, peoplesclimate.org, and a personal favorite of mine, Lakshmi Beauty. Her prior innovation with digital tools for civic engagement include YPoll, India's open government platform, which worked on women's safety in public spaces, and What's Up Bharat, which worked on engaging youth with social issues. As an Atlas Gore Fellow, she designed and implemented the training program for over 300 global social impact leaders from 60 countries. She has served as a mentor for Starting Block, a judge for social venture competitions, and an advisor to the Open Fund. She earned her master's in globalization and development from the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, which is in England, I believe. And she graduated from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. Welcome to the booth here, Dipanwita. One of the reasons why I like to read people's bio out loud, because I feel like they should at least have to sit through hearing it once in their lives.
That was adequately...
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think there's anything left.
Right. There are things in here that I know that you do that were not mentioned. When you were an Atlas Core Fellow, I also worked at Atlas Core, and we shared an office that was approximately the size of this booth.
On some days, a little
It
smaller.
seemed smaller.
Yes, it did. It did.
It was a little bitter, but on occasion we have, it wasn't just you and I remember various interns whose names, Caitlin?
Claire.
Claire. Oh yeah, there was a Claire. That was my intern. Caitlin was my intern. There was a Claire.
There was a Claire.
I remember a kid, a dude. Ben?
Choi.
Choi.
Choi was
Oh, and I had Dong and Dong.
And
Dong and Dong Ok and Dong Q.
Yeah. And then there was
This is very good. We're doing a good job.
and then there was the
Who was the one that knew what he was doing?
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I just remembering.
There was one that knew what he was doing.
He just wrote a brilliant article on gun control,
Did he?
actually. And I should remember his name.
It's
Evan Felipe.
Oh.
Who climbed mountains.
No
was
offense to the other
attacking.
interns. I'm sure you all knew what you were doing when it came to some things. But no, he was a particularly useful intern. I had a lot of good interns there. There's a lot of social impact projects. Why don't you tell us a little bit? I think we've talked about Atlas Core in the program in the past, and we've had other fellows on before. But for those of our listeners who may not remember, why don't you just tell us real quick? Atlas Core, maybe give your 5 facts. If
5
possible.
facts. So my name is Dipanwita. I am an Atlas Core Fellow from India. I served as the training manager at Atlas Core. And my fun fact is that I can write in Elvish.
Yeah, I remember that was your fun fact.
And I remember that. So
Good job. Congratulations.
thank you.
I think there's a lot of grief given around forcing all the fellows to memorize those 5 facts. And when I first heard about it, I was like, I don't understand why Scott's making such a big deal out of this. But after seeing it in practice for a while, realized that it was. And actually now, in my current, when I'm not doing this podcast, do some storytelling for nonprofit clients and realize, while it's very easy for me to introduce myself, this is a skill that does not come that naturally to a lot of social entrepreneurs.
Yep.
And especially since founding the Unfunded List, that's become abundantly clear. I mean, I've gotten some of the proposals we've gotten from a lot of folks have been very good, extremely high quality stuff. But others, including some proposals written by some extremely well-educated people, Harvard graduates and stuff, have been stuff I would have been embarrassed to hand in high school. And it's confusing to me how these people, how it happens. And I think it's just not a lot of people insist and make you practice introducing yourself, right?
Yep.
Our personal narrative skills aren't as strong as our arithmetic skills, right? I learned what 4 plus 4 is because they made me practice 4 plus 4 thousands of times until it became second nature to me, which is exactly what Scott does with the introduction.
True, and I find that increasingly you're supposed to introduce your project by starting with your story, and a very large number of people I've spoken with really struggle with telling their story, talking about the origin of their idea and so forth. And I think it's important to spend some time intentionally seeking out why you do what you do, and if there was that one thing that has really influenced you to bring that out.
Mm-hmm. And I think it is not entirely their fault. They are, while they want to tell their story, they want to tell you what they're doing. They also want to navigate the funder space. And it is definitely not they who set up the rules for that. It's the funders. And, one of the things, for me as a funder, I think the last thing I'm interested in is your mission statement. I really don't care. If you send it along, I'm probably not, maybe I'll take a look at it, but I'm certainly not going to make funding decisions based on mission statements. That's just something that a group of people wrote, like by committee, that tried to hit all the buzzwords, right? It's very rarely. So I don't technically have a mission statement yet for the Unfunded List, but I know what it is. We review rejected grant proposals.
Right.
That's what or if I really need to expand on it, like we think there's not enough feedback on rejected grant proposals, so we provide feedback on rejected grant proposals. I don't want it to be, if it has to get more complicated than that, then I need to rethink what we're doing.
Sure.
The number of mission statements I've read where I've read, and now I know your mission and I don't know your mission, they're to me, and I think, and it gets thrown out a lot. What's the company that their mission statement is "Don't be evil"?
Google.
Right. Well, that's not what it's interesting, right? And that's a big company. It's at a much larger scale than anyone who's applying to me, but it doesn't tell me what Google does.
Nope.
There is a very well-known nonprofit in the U.S. called Easter Seals. Have you ever heard of Easter Seals?
I have not, actually.
So for the boomer generation, it's extremely popular, well-known charity.
Mm-hmm.
And really for everybody, but particularly for them, because they did a big rebrand in the 60s. Before they renamed it Easter Seals, it was called, I might be getting this slightly wrong, the National Association of Crippled Children.
No.
Well, for a long time, that was how you described, children who had a disability.
Mm-hmm.
But in a lot of ways, National Association of Crippled Children is a better name than Easter Seals.
Because it tells you exactly what they do straight away.
You have no idea what Easter Seals might do. This organization is not a Christian organization, and it doesn't have anything to do with seals.
Right. For a second there, though, I did fall into that trap. I did think that they were an environmental organization of some sort, as the name would suggest. I think to your point about, why funders reject proposal and the importance of the mission statement, I think one of the biggest problems with, and I've worked both on the funder side as well as the receiving on the grantee side, is that the grantees spend all their time trying to figure out what the funders want and then crafting a project to fit the funder.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is
this peg, whatever, it's this square peg in the square
exactly
hole, whatever.
And I think that, and which is why we're not really solving problems. We're keeping a very large number of people in the jobs that they have because we're not working towards fixing problems. We're trying to fit into why a funder started funding altogether.
I often quote my father, and I've done so on the podcast many times, and you probably know that you probably heard me quote him before as well.
Yes.
I should say that just because I quote him doesn't mean he actually said it. I tend to just attribute any quote that I remember or that I want to throw out there to my father because people don't question it. But this one he definitely said, and I think it's one of the truer things he's ever said. And he is a cultural historian, I should mention, so he was talking in his area of expertise. if you find a social problem that society is not solving over a long period of time, you can find a jobs program gone out of hand.
Sure.
Every 100% of the time. And I mean, we can name a whole bunch of social problems that we've been working on for a long time, particularly here in America. And we've had about 100 years of major philanthropy, dating back to before Rockefeller and Carnegie, and a lot of things that they set out their original problems to solve. Namely, with Carnegie, that was illiteracy.
Yep.
Illiteracy is better, but for the amount of, I would have thought, and I think Andrew Carnegie would have thought, that by now, with the amount of money he put and the amount of libraries and buildings and resources he's put out there, that he would have solved American illiteracy, and he has not. We have, for a first world nation, abysmally low.
True.
Because solving social problems is harder than producing steel.
Yeah, and I also feel that there is just a lot of empowerment jargon used for the so-called quote-unquote beneficiaries who we just don't really want them to take control of their own lives and futures, because that again goes back to an organization becoming redundant. So sort of planning for redundancy, if that were a part of every organization's, at least social impact organizations' strategic plans, it would be a very interesting approach to development and to social change, I feel.
And again, I think more needs to be done on the. It's really, there's nothing to be done really on the social entrepreneur side. When you apply for a grant, you have to try to, the best advice I can give you is go to their website, learn their jargon, and use their jargon against them. Which I don't like giving people that advice. That's not I don't want it to be like that. I don't want to call out any, if they're listening now, they'll know who they are, but I did a website usability test for a fairly large foundation recently.
Right.
And I expected to be giving them, I didn't think that I was going to like the new site, because I've never, I can't think of a foundation website that I particularly like. And here's the problem, and here's why, and there's a foundational reason why a foundation website will never be good, right? Because they're not thinking about it the way that anybody else who sets up a website thinks about who their audience is and answers the questions their audience want answered.
Yep.
That is not how a foundation thinks about it. They think about what are our values and how do we best communicate our values to the people that want to partner with us.
Sure.
So this particular website, I was like, you understand that anybody who comes to your website, especially you're a very large, well-known foundation and you have a lot of money, anyone who comes here is going to be interested in knowing how you can help them. And there was nothing there about that. It was just their core values, their areas of focus, their partners, but there was no details about what those partnerships were. Just a list of prestigious organizations that partner with them.
Yep.
And I sang to her I'm not talking to anyone in the foundation. I'm talking to an IT person making the site. And I'm like, there's no my question, obviously, understanding who would go to this website, is how do I get support from this foundation? And I can't, and I'm not able to answer that question easily. And she said to me, she's like, well, they don't accept proposals. So does that change your opinion? I'm like, no, it does not. That doesn't, just because you don't accept proposals doesn't mean your audience is different now.
True.
They're still coming to the website. They still have the same questions. You have to answer, obviously what they want to know is how are you? You're the one sitting on $10 billion. They want, and you're, quite frankly, that's not your money. It's public money that belongs to all of us that you're allowed to steward. And you're required to give a certain amount of it away each year. And people come to that website wanting to know how you do that, how and why you do that.
And they have no idea how.
And maybe they understand the why, because you've gone into great lengths to describe your values. And again, I've said this many times on the podcast. Philanthropists are literally the only people who think you or other people are interested in their values. Not even politicians talk about their personal values.
True.
Right? They talk about positions, issues, things that you want to hear. Literally everybody else who communicates focuses on their audience. Philanthropists actually focus on themselves when they communicate externally, and it's crazy.
Yeah,
How do these people not understand this?
Well, perhaps, you could go back to the root cause of why the foundation or a foundation is set up at all, and why anybody with a lot of money would
Yes.
choose to give any or all of it away.
Yes.
And I think some of those questions may lead to why there's a lot more conversation about how they feel and what their values are. But
Yep.
what is very interesting about what you just said about philanthropists and their own values, it's the same thing when you're designing a program. For example, I do a lot of capacity building and a lot of training, and I can tell you that the reason why people don't go through with the training program is not because your content is bad, but because you're designing your training from your own perspective, and it's not meant. It's designed from your understanding of what people should learn, or what people should know, or what skills someone else should have. But if you actually go down and ask that person, say, what do you want to learn? Or more importantly, how do you want to learn it? Their answers will be very different from how you're delivering a piece of content.
That's fascinating. One of the more interesting comparisons made in the booth thus far. And I'd like to, I learned by repeating what I just heard. So I'm going to try to say that back. You're sort of talking about comparing philanthropy and education, and I really liked it. Because I do think there is going on sort of a shift in, are you familiar with the Montessori model
Yes.
of education?
Went through one myself.
So when you think about how to educate, you do have to think about both, right? Here's a list of things we want to make sure everybody knows once they leave, right? But and I think we're focusing on that, like the list of stuff we need to transfer to them. We think about it as the teaching is a transitive verb. I send information to you,
Right.
right? And spend not very much time thinking about learning as an action verb, right? What does the student want to learn?
Yep.
I remember one of the biggest moments of disillusionment for me was when we were learning about the Greeks in 6th grade, and one can study the Greeks for a very long time, right? But obviously this is 6th grade, and after 3 months we had to move on to the Romans, and I just remember being like, there is so. Do you understand how long? Like, this is a whole culture. I have many more questions.
True.
I need to learn more about these Greeks. But no, we had to move on. And the Romans only lasted for a couple. And we were on to Turks, and we were way away from the Greeks before long. And it was very hard to sustain. Like, I really wanted to do a deep dive into some of these things. And obviously, I had free time and was able to do that. But I think the school was like just entirely uninterested in what I wanted to learn about, in the same way that foundations are entirely uninterested in what their grantees are looking for on the website.
Absolutely. And that's why when a training program doesn't get the kind of reception they were expecting, or, for example, there's a big drop-off, there's a lot of concern about, oh my God, but why did it fall off? Very simply because you didn't ask them what they wanted before you designed something for them. And I've seen this both in in-person delivery as well as an online delivery, and especially when you're trying to build capacity in people who are geographically distant from you, working in a place, in a space which is very different from one you're working in. I think that's when you have to be really, really careful, because you cannot claim to know their infrastructural setup. So before you throw something at them, it's worth asking 10 times.
That's very interesting. No, and I think you obviously, being in the same office with you, I picked up coffee for the trainings and stuff, and helped book some speakers, I think, and stuff. But I wasn't particularly involved with it. And it's just, and as I think about it now, very interesting experience. One, you were planning a training in a city and country that you were not from, for people who also were not from that country, but who weren't necessarily from the country that you were from.
Nope.
And even if they were, you're from a country with a lot of people.
And therefore,
just because someone's also from India doesn't mean that they're and I met many other Indian fellows while there. They don't all come from the same city or background as you. And that's very interesting. When you were at St. Stephen's College, what did you, it doesn't say what your undergrad
I studied
was.
history.
History?
Yes, I
I
did.
suppose I remember that. But did you take any courses in anthropology?
I did not. We had a political science additional, or I suppose what would be called here a minor, but minor isn't given much attention very much. Most of what I studied was, it was ancient India. pre-6th century BC. That was my favorite period. Lots of pottery shards.
What are
in
you
retrospect.
have the Indus River. Right?
Yes. There's the Indus Valley civilization, but the thing that I wrote about, which is always going to be a big favorite of mine, was an urban center in present day West Bengal called Chandraketugarh. Name aside, what was very interesting is that it was.
I can pronounce that. I just don't want to.
No, don't go there. But what was very interesting is it's a terracotta city. So the art, the architecture, there was an extensive use of terracotta. And what's interesting is that it showed a lot of trade with Greeks, etc., lots of coins from different places. It was a port. It was close to a very major port in that time. But the dig exists, and as you go, and you can go
Trade
there.
with Greeks?
Oh, God, I want to say
From
Greeks, but or
the West
maybe
Bengal?
Mesopotamia. Yeah, like around that. So the Tamralipti port of it from modern day, well, we can go into that, but modern day Orissa, which is on the east
Fascinating.
coast, had a very major ancient
Anyway.
port. But anyway, yeah, so
a big
that's what
topic.
I did.
I mentioned, I want to give a shout out to one of the Lookout members. He actually, if you're watching online or on your phone, the pictures you're looking at were taken by Cole Threlkeld of Emic Films. And within anthropology, there's basically two schools of thought, right? Anthropology is the study of cultures. And Cole's company is called Emic Films. One of the schools is called Emic Anthropology, and the other one is Etic Anthropology. And these are old Greek or possibly Latin. Or do you speak Greek or Latin?
I do not.
You speak Elvish, but not Greek or Latin?
Yeah,
just to be
Elvish
clear.
is so much more relevant.
It's about approximately as relevant. I see it on TV as often. So Emic refers to the insider's perspective, and Etic, of course, means the outsider's perspective. And obviously, when it comes to them, they like to make films. They like to go in and meet the people who are receiving they do mostly nonprofit work. They like to really go in there and see the people who are on the ground. Right? Not a lot of talking head type, from above type stuff. There is actually some virtue in doing in both schools of thought, but I think we have far too many Etic philanthropists. One of the things I'm most proud of as a philanthropist is that I've also been a development assistant. I did the lowest possible work on the totem pole in a fundraising office, and there are a lot of philanthropists who've done fundraising, but it's because they were like the chair of an annual campaign or something. Right? They didn't file all the thank you letters. Right? They didn't enter all the data in a razor's edge. They don't like. When you're a philanthropist, you often create burdens for your grantees. Often, almost always, almost every funder does this to some extent. And the number that are mindful of those burdens or give a shit about them. And I can tell you, we've had previous, some of my predecessors running the Moss Family Foundation and the various family trusts did not care. I can state that unequivocally. This was our money, and if they want it, they'll do what we say, and if they don't want it, they won't. And I don't need to hear anything more on the subject. Which is there's actually nothing morally wrong with that. That it is your money. You do when you go to Walmart, you don't want to accept lectures on what you should buy, right?
True.
I think philanthropy should be the same way, and I think we can trust people to make their own decisions about their philanthropy. But they should, if you are doing philanthropy, which is, and I like to define that as purchasing social change. You should understand, where you're getting the better bargains.
Sure, absolutely. And just build from the perspective of the people you want to benefit.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And at the same time, I understand how difficult it can be to. If you've got an open proposal process as a funder, trying to be in touch with everybody who applied is going to be tough. I think most of them, it's all they can do to give care and compassion to the folks that they are funding, the folks that they are not. It's a difficult situation that they are in. I think every foundation that I've ever spoken with knows very well that there are great ideas in the pool that they reject. No one's ever told me. No one's ever told me otherwise.
And it's a burden that you have to live with. And I think if you pick 5 out of 25 people to fund, just to make sure that those 5 projects or organizations are able to move several steps closer to their mission, and you've therefore moved several steps closer to yours.
And if you do happen to be one of those 20 folks that are not funded in that 5 of 25 pool, not all hope is not lost.
No.
You can send your proposal to the Unfunded List, and our professional evaluation committee, and also me, will take a look at that proposal and give you our best suggestions for where you can go forward. Dipanwita, do you have any last words for the dozens, if not 100 plus people who might be listening right now?
Well, focus a little bit on capacity building, and remember to redirect people who have unfunded proposals to Dave. He
Yes.
is one of the best reviewers I know, and he will give you the
thank
feedback
you.
that will help. I can tell that from experience.
Well, thank you very much. So yeah, whether you're a funder with a pile of proposals that you can't fund, or a fund seeker with an unfunded proposal that you want my opinion on, please check out unfundedlist.com. Dipanwita Das of Das Social Strategies. It's what is your website?
It's dasstrategies.com.
DasStrategies.com. If you need strategic communications help or just a smart person to help you with your social good work, I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
As always, I want to thank The Lookout, which is a beautiful co-working community for filmmakers located in the Adams Morgan neighborhood of Washington, D.C., also known as the Hollywood of Washington, D.C. Thank you to our loyal listeners. Hi, Mom.